Hi, I'm Jimmy Christopher, the Group Sustainability Officer at ITL, and thanks for listening to our presentation at Outdoor Retailer. Today I'm going to be taking you through some sustainability work of ours, what we're doing in this field, what we are doing to help our customers in this field, our policy, some certifications, some of our products and solutions, as well as some information on carbon footprinting. So sustainability and the retail industry, particularly the fashion industry in this case, has very much come into the limelight in the last number of years, with the consumer now buying 60% more clothes than they did about 20 years ago and keeping garments about half as long. This results in a considerable burden on natural resources, with the expectation that we will need as many as 3 times the natural resources by the year 2050. You can see why this is the case on the right. 2,700 liters roughly of water for a cotton t-shirt, and just for the production of polyester in 2015, 706 billion kilograms of carbon emissions. So these are staggering figures that clearly need to be addressed in the industry. With the topic of sustainability comes numerous risks and opportunities for businesses. On the risk side, there are now increasing requirements and expectations from a customer, investor, and stakeholder perspective. There's also an increase in regulations, for example, things like the carbon tax, which basically translates to if you emit more carbon dioxide, you will be taxed on that amount above a certain threshold, depending on the country that you're in. The laws differ. But from the customer point of view, the consumers are considerably more eco-conscious, and it really does matter if a brand can be transparent and products can be traceable. There's also the risk of increasing costs and the risk of supply of things like electricity and water with the effects of climate change. The risk of supply of water and electricity could be impacted through natural disasters around the world. The costs of, for example, water could go up, which if there is a drought, which we saw where I'm based in Cape Town a number of years ago. There's also the risk of compliance, both from a brand image perspective as well as a financial perspective. You must comply with environmental regulations, and I feel sustainability goes beyond compliance, but it is still a risk there. There are also, within these risks, numerous opportunities that should be taken advantage of by brands looking to become more sustainable. You can increase your public image by being a leader in this process, by showing the consumer that you are going above and beyond to be sustainable, which is where everyone should be aiming. There are also cost savings and financial incentives available, numerous financial incentives to encourage the uptake of green technologies, for example, incentives in investing in solar for your facilities, as well as for investing in energy efficient machinery and other things of that nature. At ITL, we have committed to numerous sustainable development goals, 10 specifically, and certain targets underneath those. As you can see, the goals there on your left, and the targets under each goal that are specific to us. Underneath that, we have an ITL environmental policy that was published in late 2019 and updated again last year. The SDG focused goals we have there are high level for us, and the policy is more specific towards us as a business, where we know the impacts and we know our business well, and hence have focused on those areas. In the policy, the first area of concern for us was materials. Under this, we pledge to source materials that are certified and sustainable, with an emphasis on certification being linked to the transparency that I mentioned earlier. Being able to know where products and feedstocks come from is becoming increasingly important these days. We also want to increase the use of recycled content where applicable, due to the fact that using recycled content has a lower environmental impact than using virgin content. This is the case for both plastics and for paper materials. We want to eliminate single-use plastics from our internal operations, look to find paper alternatives where we can for certain plastic applications, and generally trying to phase out single-use plastics from our operations. We also want to incorporate end-of-life implications of our products during the design phase, including things like recyclability. It's very important now to understand that once a garment, for example, is disposed of, if our label is on it, that label will go with the garment to its end of life. The amount of clothing that ends up in landfill is significant. It's important to understand what happens to these garments at end of life, so we can design with this in mind, helping to reduce the overall environmental impact. You can see the 3 Sustainable Development Goals at the bottom that these pledges feed into. Another area that was highlighted by the earlier stats on cotton, for example, is the amount of water that the fashion and textile supply chain uses. We use water at our operations, and hence we want to decrease our overall water usage across all of our operations. We treat all of our processed water to meet environmental standards. We want to increase the rates of water that we recycle within our own operations. Again, this helps to decrease overall water usage and can be a cost-saving exercise. We also want to protect water-related ecosystems, including wetlands, rivers, aquifers, and lakes, ensuring that we don't ever pollute areas in which we operate. Greenhouse gas emissions and energy, hugely relevant again by the polyester figures that you saw earlier. We pledge to conduct an annual company-wide carbon footprint and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions annually. By doing this, one of the ways in which we'll do this is to decrease the amount of energy we use across all of our operations. Obviously, the business still needs energy to operate, as all businesses do. So we will look to renewable resources that have a lower carbon footprint than grid energy in various locations. We also pledge to analyze our Scope 3 emissions and compile a comprehensive Scope 3 inventory. This is something that needs to be focused more on this textile value chain, as they can often comprise hidden emissions along the supply chain. And I'll go into more detail on Scope 3 emissions shortly. We also pledge to increase awareness and training on climate change mitigation. I feel it's very important that climate change and sustainability be embedded within a business in our core decision making and throughout all of our personnel. And being aware on climate change, some of its impacts, and how to mitigate it is hugely important for us as a business. On the carbon footprint note, on the top left there, that pie graph is the 2018 carbon footprint profile of our China facility. As you can see, 96% of that comes from electricity usage. Hence the focus on trying to decrease our energy across our operations, because we know that that'll have a direct impact on our company-wide carbon footprint. Under waste, we pledge to decrease the amount of waste generated through prevention, reduction, recycling, and reuse. It starts with, as I mentioned earlier, the design phase, trying to design so that we produce less waste from the start. Where we do produce waste, we want to increase the use of post-consumer recycled materials. Like I mentioned earlier, using post-consumer recycled content has a lower environmental impact than using virgin, so we want to incorporate that into our products. We want to increase the rates of recycling for both plastic and paper packaging materials. So this refers to general plastic and paper waste around our facilities. We want to ensure that we recycle that. We also, where we use things like inks and chemicals, we ensure that all that waste is disposed of responsibly by licensed contractors. So those type of waste aren't generally recyclable. We look to recycle them where possible, but if not, we ensure responsible disposal at all times. Local air emissions is also something that's quite relevant for this industry, particularly stemming from printing operations. We pledge here to increase local air quality at all of our operations by reducing the amount of VOCs, oxides of nitrogen and oxides of sulfur. VOCs, they stand for volatile organic compounds. These are basically gases that are emitted when printing inks dry or certain cleaning agents dry. So these can have an impact on worker health. Hence, we want to increase our air quality by choosing alternative products that have lower quantities of these. For example, certain inks like water-based and vegetable oil-based inks can have lower quantities, as well as then using the correct treatment and extraction at all of our facilities to ensure that we don't pollute with these local air emissions, as well as ensuring our worker health. There are also numerous certifications, standards, and programs that are relevant for our industry and for ITL as a business. The first one is Ecotech Standard 100, which is a product-specific certification. If you see this, it means that the product has been tested against the Ecotex list of chemicals, and it means the product is not ecologically harmful to human beings. We also hold numerous FSC chain of custody certifications at our global facilities. This means that we are able to print FSC logos on products like you see on the right. The FSC itself, Forest Stewardship Council, tracks paper along the supply chain to ensure that the forests are managed sustainably. We also use the Higg Index, FEM and FSLM, which stands for Facility Environmental Module and Facility Social and Labor Module. We use both of those at all of our facilities globally. This is a self-assessment of our environmental and social performance, which can then be externally audited and have your scores verified. We are a recent member of the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, as well as a recent signatory of the UN Global Compact, and we will uphold the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact and also use this to advance our progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. We also have various of our facilities that hold their own SMETA audits, which stands for SEDEX Members Ethical Trade Audit. This is an environmental and social on-site audit. I mentioned that designing from the first phase to be efficient with material use can have a significant impact on your environmental performance. We have an award-winning product re-engineering solution called Intelligent that redesigns labels to minimize your raw material wastage. It doesn't compromise on any aesthetics or quality, as you'll see in the next slide. This applies to our woven and our paper products. An example of it in use here is you can see that this paper hang tag, the length was changed from 85 mils to 76.5, with the width remaining the same. Over a run of 1 million units, this will result in 546 kilograms savings of paper, which is a significant weight of paper. With saving that paper that now did not need to be manufactured, in essence, comes a number of trees saved there. As you can see, there's also a significant energy saving and a large water saving, because paper is such a water intensive process, as well as a eutrophication saving, because paper, being a water intensive process, often results in local water pollution. So this slide illustrates that a small reduction in things like dimensions to suit our machines, where our expertise will advise our customers on making a change like this, and you can see the results for yourself. I mentioned earlier the carbon footprinting process, something that's become very important for us as a business, and it is become hugely important for all businesses to understand this, especially if we are to meet the goals of the Paris Accords by 2050, with companies making numerous pledges to become carbon neutral. We are on that journey as well. We did our full 2018 baseline and have completed a 2019 carbon footprint as well. We are now underway with our 2020, and we are getting more accurate and including more scope in each iteration of our footprint. To explain the scopes, you can see at the top of your screen there, a carbon footprint is split into scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, where scope 1 and scope 2 are basically your direct impacts, although electricity usage under scope 2 is still deemed indirect. But scope 3 are the ones that your business is not directly responsible for. As you can see, some examples of scope 3 are things like employee business travel, transportation and distribution. So that would be things like product logistics, where your business doesn't own the assets that are emitting the carbon emissions, but you are still responsible for those activities. And it's something that can be quite difficult to calculate along the textiles value chain and can often result in the hidden emissions I mentioned. So we feel it's very important for us to have an in-depth insight into our scope 3. So we're getting more granular with each iteration and wanting to include more detailed data in this so we can really understand our impacts properly. Like I mentioned in the beginning, sustainability is a double-edged sword for us. It's about reducing our own impacts, but it's also about being able to reduce our customers' impacts by providing them with sustainable products. One way we have done this is to launch our Care collection last year, which brings together our sustainable products in one portfolio. I'm going to go through a few examples of them, but if you'd like to request the full catalog, you can make contact with my colleague Laura, who's on our outdoor retailer booth. Some examples here are recycled polyester yarns and substrates, as well as recycled nylon substrates are there as well. As I mentioned, using recycled content has a significantly lower environmental impact than using virgin. There's a considerable reduction in energy and GHG emissions, as well as the fact that using post-consumer waste can help to divert waste that would have sometimes gone to a landfill otherwise. And another product under fibers and substrates is Tencel, which is a 100% bio-based fiber made using FSC sources. It's got considerably lower impact than things like cotton. Because it's bio-based, it would be biodegradable and compostable, obviously given the right conditions. Organic cotton as well, grown with no GMOs and pesticides. Because these pesticides, GMOs, fertilizers, etc. are not manufactured, this results in a large water and energy reduction in organic cotton compared to conventional cotton. We also have a number of boards and paper products. What I said earlier about the post-consumer waste applies very much here as well. Boards made with 100% recycled fiber have a lower impact than boards made with virgin fiber. We have FSC mixed boards as well, with varying levels of recycled content as well as recycled kraft, and FSC self-adhesive stickers. The FSC badge means that the forest is managed under the Forest Stewardship Council. Like I mentioned, this helps to improve things like water management, as well as ensuring fair treatment of indigenous people in these areas. Using recycled board has lower energy and carbon emissions implications, as well as wastewater implications. We also have a sustainable RFID that does not have the traditional PET inlay that a large amount of RFIDs do. This helps to reduce the carbon footprint of it, with the paper being less weight and having a lower carbon footprint than the PET equivalent. But the main benefit here is the fact that the paper helps to aid in recycling compared to PET, particularly on the example you see on your left with that RFID sticker stuck on a hang tag. The RFID would follow that hang tag into a paper recycling stream, and the fact that there is a paper layer in the RFID and not PET would not hamper the recycling process. The antenna would drop out and the paper would pulp. If there was PET, sometimes these plastics going into paper recycling processes can be detrimental to the paper recycling process. Thanks very much for listening to our presentation today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or my colleague Laura, and let's make progress together.